But until recently, I really haven't done much public speaking about the issue, and I think that's mostly because in my mind I always thought, well, I'm going to wait till I'm better. I'm going to wait till I'm recovered so I can get up here and say, I beat anorexia, and this is what it was, and this is what it was like, and this is how I got better. 20 years later, that hasn't happened for me yet. So I thought I can sit around and still wait for that day, or I can start using my story and using the knowledge that I've gained over the past 20 years to promote awareness and advocacy and education. So I feel like living in it for so long, I have gained a lot of knowledge about it. So that's where I am today, and that's kind of the point of view I'm talking from. So when Tom first asked me to come, I got pretty nervous. There's a lot of information in the PowerPoint, and I'm probably going to skip over some of it just in the interest of time, but you have it there to take home and read and whatever. There's a lot to say, and wrapping up the past 20 years in an hour is a little bit difficult. So I'm going to try really hard to stay on track here. But just to give you before I start the PowerPoint, just to give you a brief timeline of my story. I'm 38 now. My eating disorder, I probably had the makings for it my entire life, but it didn't really manifest into anorexia until I was 18, until I went away to college. That transition for me was really difficult. I didn't have a very good relationship with my family or with my parents. But I had a really close relationship with my group of friends, and going to college, I grew up in Cleveland and moved to Columbus to go to Ohio State, and here I am at this ginormous university where I was pretty much no one, going from a small high school to where I knew my place, and I had my little clique of friends, and I thought I knew who I was at that point as much as a teenager can know who they are. So I had a really difficult time transitioning, and pretty much as soon as I got there, I was feeling kind of lost and alone and not really sure what to do with where I was in life. So I was going to focus on, well, I'm going to start getting healthier. And that's all it was, is I was never overweight. I was actually always really a tiny person. But it gave my mind something to focus on rather than this like crazy, weird transitional state that I was in. I'm going to focus on being healthy, and I'm going to start eating better. And really, that's really what I thought I was doing. I had no intention of losing vast amounts of weight. I don't even think I was really aware of my weight at the time. I wasn't weighing myself or anything like that. So it was just, I'm going to get healthier. And at that point, things went downhill really fast. And people started to make comments to me when I came home for Christmas break. I had lost a lot of weight. But at that point, I still thought, I'm fine, but I can eat. I can eat when I want to. And it wasn't until that Christmas break that I really realized in my mind that I couldn't do it if I wanted to anymore. Like I thought, I'll come home for Christmas break and we'll go out to eat and I'll show everyone that I'm just fine. I'm absolutely fine. And I couldn't do it. And that scared the crap out of me. Like that I suddenly knew I didn't have control over this anymore. And how crazy is that? Like I'm hungry and I want to eat and I can't? That doesn't make any sense. So that scared me, but I was still trying to downplay it a lot. Make a long story short, went back to school, didn't last very long until my sister had a conversation with me and convinced me to leave school and go back home to Cleveland and try and get some help. So my 20s were pretty much consumed with the eating disorder and trying to get better. It was a lot of ups and downs, and at first it was met with a lot of anger and frustration from my family and even from the doctors that I was seeing at the time. They really didn't specialize in eating disorders. And I don't know if it just wasn't talked about as much then, or if it just wasn't a common topic. My doctors didn't understand what was happening. I didn't understand what was happening. My family didn't. It seemed to be an issue with food. Why are you being so stubborn? Why don't you just eat? Why don't you just do this? And for a while, it helped me. Everyone thought I didn't have an appetite or wasn't really that hungry. And that felt better because that was at least logical. I'm not eating because I don't have an appetite. I certainly couldn't tell anybody I'm hungry and I dream about eating food, but I can't, because that didn't make any sense. Like, well, why am I not allowed to eat? I didn't really even understand what was happening to me at the time. So it was a few years until I got hooked up through a friend of a friend who knew a pediatrician that dealt with eating disorders. And even though I was an adult, this pediatrician agreed to see me. And that's kind of when a flip happened from this angry, frustrated, you annoying little girl that won't eat, to one of compassion and empathy, and treated in a way that it was an actual problem instead of just I was being a bratty, stubborn person. So she hooked me up with a therapist whose name was Nikki in Cleveland that I continued to work with for a very long time. She was an eating disorder specialist, and I had seen lots of therapists up until that point, just hopping from one to the next, none of them who really understood what was going on for me. I was keeping a lot of secrets to myself because it was shameful and embarrassing. But Nikki changed things for me. She knew my secrets before I told them to her. And that made me trust her to help me with this. She knew the things that were in my head before I even said them. She knew what was going on. So it was through Nikki that I learned about these places called treatment centers that treated people with eating disorders, and through my 20s I was in and out of hospitals and treatment centers across the country. Each time I would go and gain weight, come back, not with the intention of losing it again, or it just somehow always fell off. I'd go, get a little healthier, come home, things would go back downhill. I was in and out of school. I've been to lots of colleges, took a few classes here, a few classes there, started and stopped lots of jobs, wasn't really finding any stability. And then in my late 20s, I think I was 28, I went again to a treatment center in Arizona, and this time I came home and I think I made some changes immediately. I decided, usually when I got home, I had some momentum, I was ready to go, and then things would gradually fall off. So I got home this time and I decided I'm going to move to Columbus. My sister and brother lived here, I had a friend that lived here. I'm moving out of my parents' house, I am moving to Columbus, I'm going to finish my degree, and I was at a healthier place so I could do that. And so the next, probably from like 30 to 35, I was doing pretty well. I was maintaining a healthy weight. I was a lot more flexible. I was in this new place where I felt like I had a fresh start. Nobody knew me as they did back home as Beth, the girl with anorexia. I was this new person. I had no stigma attached to me, and it felt really good. I was able to graduate college with my bachelor's in psychology. I bought a house. I got my first full-time job with NAMI. I was more social, I was more flexible with food. I was able to maintain a healthier weight. What I wasn't really honest about during all of that is that the eating disorder voice, which I'll talk about in a little bit, never really went away, and I still was very rigid about what I ate, where I ate, when I ate, how many calories I was eating. All of that was still going on internally, but at that point I would have probably considered myself in recovery. Even though looking back on it now, I see that I really wasn't as recovered as I thought I was, and but I wasn't going to let that into this new life. People knew I was referred to myself as being weird about food. They knew I was weird about food. Like, Beth's kind of weird about food. Like, she'll only eat certain things, and she, really doesn't like to eat with people. But so it was just wasn't going to open the door of, well, I used to be anorexic, as it was a thing of the past, even though it was still really in my life. So I could have gone on like that. I left NAMI, Ohio, got a job as a social services director in the nursing home field. I felt like I was managing the symptoms of the eating disorder. It was still there, but I was managing. I was a lot more functional than I had been all through my 20s, so I thought maybe this is as good as it gets. Maybe this is it. Maybe this is all I can expect. So I probably could have gone on like that, and then in the winter of 2013, I was in a near-fatal car accident where I was ejected over 90 feet onto the highway. I was hit by a semi. I don't remember any of the accident, so I have no memories of anything. I fractured everything on my left side, vertebrae, head trauma, all of that, which kind of knocked me off my feet for the next 6 months. I was in the trauma unit at the hospital, and then I had to move back in with my parents. So I was in a neck and torso brace for 6 months. Couldn't function on my own at all, living with my parents at the age of 35, who we didn't have our relationship was better at that time. Wasn't that great, but 35-year-old woman needing to be bathed by her mom was kind of hard. So at that point, everyone was really focused on my recovery from this accident and my physical status. No one was really on the lookout, me included, for eating disorder stuff. That was like not a thing. It wasn't prominent in my life anymore, and I didn't want it to be. So it was really easy at that time for it to kind of sneak its way back in, and I wasn't expecting it, I wasn't looking for it, but through some therapeutic discussions afterwards, you know, it was probably because I couldn't do anything for myself. I couldn't control everything. I couldn't turn over. I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't do anything. So I subconsciously went back to something I could control, which was what I put into my body and what food I got. So after those 6 months, I was able to go back to my work. I was on short-term disability from work. Went back to the nursing home for about 6 months before I was confronted a lot by people and admitted to myself, yeah, the eating disorder has a hold of me again. It's back, full-fledged. My weight was down. I was very into my eating disorder. So I had to take short-term disability again from work and re-enter treatment. And the next 3 years I've never really bounced back since the car accident. So they say the PTSD that I've been diagnosed with coupled with the anorexia, so I don't have a lot of the classic PTSD symptoms, not afraid to drive, which would be typical for my car accident. Don't have flashbacks and nightmares about the accident. I don't even remember the accident because I was out for so long. But it overcouples, which I guess means that it attaches itself, the PTSD symptoms attach themselves to a pre-existing condition. So all of my symptoms come out in my eating disorder. So I ended up having to quit the job. My FMLA ran out, apply for Social Security disability, and I've been in and out of treatment centers since that time and haven't really, unfortunately, been able to get back on track since then. I work part-time for NAMI again, but I still am on disability. And this was a hard thing for me to come to terms with, being in the social services field myself. Wait, I'm the one that helps people get on disability. I'm not on disability. Wait, I'm on disability. Like, it was just kind of been a weird flip for me. So that's where I am today. And I guess just to start with that PowerPoint, just some statistics. Eating disorders are a struggle for 10 million females and 1 million males in the United States, which surprises a lot of people that males are included, but they definitely are included in that. And 4 out of 10 individuals either have struggled themselves or know somebody that did. There are 4 major eating disorders, and I'm not going to go into as much detail as I put in the PowerPoint, but in the DSM, there's 4 specific categories. Most people have heard of anorexia and bulimia. Bulimia is overeating or binge eating and then doing some sort of compensatory behavior afterwards to get rid of the intake. So if that's self-induced vomiting or laxative abuse or over-exercising, things like that. Then there is binge eating disorder, which is new in the DSM-5. It's not really new, but it used to be lumped in with OSFED, which is other specified feeding and eating disorders. And that's kind of the catch-all. Binge eating disorder used to be in there, but they gave it a separate diagnosis now. And that's basically, it's like bulimia in the fact that it's binge eating, out of control eating, very large amounts of food, but without the compensatory activity. And then there's OSFED, like I talked about, and that's kind of the catch-all for everything that doesn't fit into the criteria of one of the other eating disorders, kind of gets thrown there. So an example would be atypical anorexia nervosa, where a person fits all the criteria for anorexia, but they're not severely underweight, which surprises a lot of people. Well, you can't be overweight and have anorexia. Yeah, you can. Like, there are many people that do. But like I said, my issue has been anorexia nervosa, which is characterized by, I'm going to forget to do this, inadequate food intake leading to a weight that's clearly too low, intense fear of gaining weight, obsession with weight, persistent behavior to prevent weight gain. Its prevalence, it's estimated that 1 to 4.2% have suffered from anorexia in their lifetime, and it has the highest mortality rate, actually, of all mental illnesses. It's estimated that 4% of anorexics die. I do have some friends that have passed away. I've made a lot of friends over the years in and out of all the different treatments. And usually it's not, sometimes it's death by suicide, but most of the time it's heart failure is what happens, heart attack or heart failure. There are lots of health consequences that come along with anorexia. when the body is decided or deprived of its nutrients, the body has to slow down everything to make it function correctly. And it's kind of amazing what the body will do to keep a person alive. But a lot of the things, the heart rate slows, blood pressure drops, osteoporosis, muscle weakness, dry skin, dry hair, hair falling out, dehydration, fainting, feeling very, very cold all the time because your body doesn't want to use that extra energy to try and keep you warm. Luckily, I have not experienced very many medical repercussions, which has kind of been to the amazement of a lot of the doctors that I've seen. My lab work always comes back like I'm perfectly healthy. My EKGs always come back like I'm perfectly healthy. And the doctors look at my weight and then they look at this and this doesn't match up. And sometimes I think, gosh, I'm so lucky that that's happened. And sometimes I wonder if that makes it easier for me to deny the severity of my situation sometimes too. Well, nothing is wrong. My lab work's all coming back fine. It can't be that bad. I have had most of the other things, osteoporosis, muscle loss, hair loss, fatigue. I've never passed out, which surprises some people, but so there's pluses to that. I'm very grateful that I haven't, but it also makes it a little bit harder to accept. Causes of eating disorders, the cause is greatly unknown. It's usually a conglomeration of a lot of different factors all thrown in together, as it is for me. And at first, I used to wish that I did have just one big traumatic event that really caused the eating disorder. A lot of people for a while thought, you know, eating disorders only happen to people that were sexually abused or went through some horrific experience, and I didn't have any of that. It was a little bit of this and a little bit of that, a little bit over here, everything combining to like form the perfect recipe for anorexia. But they usually say that psychological factors, environmental, sociocultural factors, and biological and neurobiological factors play a role. And up until this point in time, usually the environment and psychosocial or sociocultural aspects were focused on, mostly because they thought that was the biggest impact. Recently, they've been doing a ton of new research that shows a huge biological and neurobiological component, which for me is really kind of exciting because I guess it feels a little bit more validating. Oh, there's actually something wrong in my brain. That is why I'm not doing these things that logically I know I should be doing that I can't seem to do. Oh, like there's a reason. It's not just because I'm messed up. Like there's an actual physiological, something is not firing correctly in my brain. They haven't really come up with solutions for this yet, which is why so much more research and funding needs to be done. But the fact that they're finding this now is really kind of exciting. Psychological factors would include things like negative body image, poor self-esteem, feelings of inadequacy, lack of control, shame and guilt, all of which I've had pretty much my whole life. Environmental factors, again, this is kind of where most of my therapy has been focused on. That was the going theory in eating disorder world. So that can include dysfunctional family dynamics, trauma, stressful transitions or life changes, and peer pressure and cultural media messages, the media's obsession with thinness, all of that kind of stuff. And for me, like I've talked about for transitions or life stages, that's kind of where it started, was that transition to college was difficult for me. But I think the family dynamic and trauma also played a big role in the development of my eating disorder. So I'm the youngest of 4 kids, and I wasn't really a planned pregnancy or a real welcome surprise to my parents, who were already having difficulties at the time that they found out they were pregnant with a 4th child. My sister, the one that's just about a year and a half, 2 years older than me, was starting to exhibit some issues already, some problems. They were focused on getting Katie is her name, trying to figure out what was going on with her. My parents' marriage wasn't doing well. They were financially strapped. They just had a lot going on, and they weren't really super gung-ho about a 4th kid coming along. Not that I had a horrible childhood or that my parents were bad in any way. I think they honestly did the best they could with what they had at the time. They had no ill intentions. They didn't treat me poorly, purposefully. They didn't know what was happening. They did the best that they could. Unfortunately, I don't think, now looking back, that it was quite enough what a young child needed at the time. I don't think I have trouble saying this because I don't think I probably got the love and attention that a child needs, the nurturing growing up. Katie was kind of the focus. Katie needed help. She was this troublesome child who was out of control and had all these huge emotions and temper tantrums and fits, and Beth could take care of herself. Beth had friends and she did well in school, and the less I needed from them, the better. And that seemed to work really well for everyone. I'm going to make myself really small and invisible, and I'm not going to need you guys. But the secret in my little kid head was, I really need you, and I really need help, and I really need love and nurturing, and I can't give that. And they didn't have time for that. They were focused on Katie, who eventually, just to really briefly on Katie, she was eventually, as an adult, her problems continued through childhood, adolescence, adulthood. As an adult, she was finally properly diagnosed with bipolar disorder, Asperger's, and also a slight developmental delay, which growing up, my parents had no knowledge of that, which is where NAMI comes into play. They finally, eventually got hooked up with a NAMI family-to-family class, learned about bipolar disorder, learned about mental illness, were able to confront Katie's issues differently. It all happened a little late because we were already adults by that time, but it was still helpful to some point. But it wasn't handled correctly when we were kids. Again, they just didn't know what to do. To them, she was just a very out of control, emotional person. And I think what I subconsciously learned was, oh shoot, I have really big emotions too, and I have really big feelings. But I'm not going to let anyone see that, because look what's happening to Katie. You know, she's getting punished for it. The police are being called. She's being kicked out of school. Eventually, she was sent to a home for troubled girls. And it wasn't a home for mentally ill. It was kind of a juvenile delinquent home for bad girls. You know, and at that point, it scared me to death. There is no way that I'm going to let anyone see that I feel anything, because this is what happens to people that express their emotions. They get banished from the house. They get sent away, and I'm not going to let that happen. So I think this is all, like, of course I didn't realize this as it was happening. This is all like adult stuff that I've learned about myself. But I think that had a significant impact on me, and me trying to put on a facade that everything was okay and I didn't feel and I didn't have emotions. Also, during that time, you know, I didn't realize this as a child, but my dad had his own issues going on. My mom had her own issues going on. They had marital problems happening. Suffice it to say that everyone had a lot going on. So, let's see, trying to wrap this up here, at least this portion of it. So, again, just trying to make myself as unneedy as possible. And when the eating disorder is in full swing, I don't have to worry about neediness or being too much for people or having too big of emotions, because the eating disorder does a really good job of stifling my emotions, and it numbs all of that, and it works really well. It also tries to kill me, but it also works really well for numbing out my feelings and emotions. Biological factors, like I said, they're finding genetic components, temperament issues, which I have all of: obsessive thinking, perfectionism, sensitivity to reward and punishment, harm avoidance, emotional instability, hypersensitivity, rigidity, excessive persistence. All of those things were in my life long before the eating disorder took hold, but those are definitely all parts of my temperament. And then, as I said, the newest research is showing the neurobiological factors, which is really cool. They've done lots of scans on the brains of anorexic individuals and then healthy brains. There are actual areas of the brain, and you can read about them in the PowerPoint, that are very different that come up on a person with anorexia. Structural and functional differences in the brain that are happening. The neural networks are firing differently. One thing, like I said, they haven't really come up with a treatment for this yet, but I am doing something called neurofeedback, which is kind of a new and experimental. They use it for autism a lot, and addictions, and OCD, and they just started trying to use it for eating disorders, and have had some success, but of course people don't know yet, because just not enough research has been done about it. But I am trying that out. I haven't really noticed any effects as of yet, but it is supposed to correct the brain waves. So again, go in 3 times a week, and they hook up little electrodes to my brain, and I wear special goggles and headphones, and I watch Netflix for an hour, and supposedly it's working on my brain. I don't really understand it, but I will go and watch I'm currently watching Blacklist, which is a pretty good show, but that's my therapy right now, so we'll see. I'll let you know if it changes anything for me. So I talked a little bit about the eating disorder voice, and just to be clear, when I talk about the eating disorder voice, it is not an audible voice. It's not an audible hallucination, as in with people with schizophrenia or something. I'm not hearing voices, but in the eating disorder treatment world, they call it a voice. It's more of a rigid thought pattern, a constant thought pattern that's replayed over in my mind all the time. It can be likened to a person's inner bully. I sometimes call it, the evil dictator. It dictates what I am and am not allowed to do. My family was very rule-based growing up, and there were strict rules, and there was black and white. And I never really learned to make my own decisions. It was, this is how you do it, this is not how you do it. And so I think I subconsciously grew up with this belief that Beth can't make decisions on her own. She needs somebody to tell her what to do all the time, all the while hating that. Like, hey, I want my own. It's like I'm in this battle with myself all the time. I want to make my own decisions. There's this like little kid inside of me, but no, you can't, because you're gonna mess this up. I need to make all your decisions for you, which is what the eating disorder voice tells me, shouting out orders and rules and punishment. The goal of the eating disorder voice is to convince people that their worst fears are true, whatever that may be, that they're worthless, that they're undeserving of love and happiness, that they're alone, whatever that fear is, they are there to convince you that it's true. It's very manipulative. It lies constantly. It's a very abusive voice, but there's a girl named Jenny Schaefer who wrote a book with her therapist, Tom Rutledge, called Life Without Ed, and that's where they compared your relationship with your eating disorder to the relationship you have with an abusive husband or lover or boyfriend, or actually any kind of abusive relationship. And this made a huge difference for me, this book. And treatment, even still today, it's largely focused around dialoguing with Ed, they call him, for eating disorder. So if you're ever around eating disorder people, they may refer to it as Ed. But it made a whole lot of sense to me. This is exactly what it was like. It is abusive, and it abuses you, and then it lures you back in with manipulation and lies. So, for example, because I know this can be really confusing, example of something that would go on in my head on a daily basis. This is, you're talking to somebody, it's not out here, but this is like what's replaying in my head. It might say something like, fine, Beth, go ahead and eat whatever you want. Go ahead and do it. I'm not stopping you. But I promise I really have only your best interest in mind. I don't want to see you in pain, and if you don't follow my rules, you're going to be in pain. You're going to push people away because your emotions and feelings are too much for other people to handle. They're too much for you to handle. I promise it's just going to lead to chaos, and it might kill you. But go ahead and do what you want, but if you listen to my rules, I promise that's not going to happen. So it's really convincing and really caring and loving. Oh, right, I need to follow, because you're saving me from pain, so I'm going to follow your rules. Even though logically, I've seen this replay out, and it doesn't work that way. It's that thing of where you see somebody being abused by their husband, why don't you leave him? Because it's this weird manipulative pattern in your brain that goes on, and it makes me frustrated with myself. I get very frustrated with myself. When at first it was met with a lot of frustration, sometimes I just want to say, you're frustrated with me? Try being me. Like, how am I not frustrated with myself that I know I need to do all these things and I can't get myself to do them? That is frustration. So take that frustration that you feel, multiply that by 100, and that's how I feel. So again, dialoguing with the eating disorder voice is often promoted. They say journal, have a conversation in therapy, sit across from your therapist and talk it out. This is what Ed's saying, this is what you're saying. And trying to separate yourself out, and I still need to do that a lot because it becomes such a part of you, and I need to step back and say, wait, is that an eating disorder thought, or is that a Beth thought? Is that a healthy thought, or is that an eating disorder thought? And checking in with people, and I'm lucky enough to have a really great support system. We've done a ton of family therapy. My relationship with my family is very good now. Me and my parents have a much healthier relationship. They're probably my biggest supporters, along with my friends who have been amazing, two of which are here today. And they've just been great. I'm not an easy person to be friends with because I go through these ups and downs, and when I'm really in my eating disorder, I'm not very much fun. I can't go out to eat. Every social event involves food. I'm very uncomfortable in those situations. let alone the fact I'm usually pretty tired all the time, I don't have energy. It's not easy to stay in my life, and I'm lucky enough that a lot of people have stayed in my life and are there for me and are there when I need to talk about stuff. So I'm grateful for that. There are a lot of similarities between eating disorders and addictions, and unlike most mental illnesses, eating disorders do serve a purpose in the fact that they stifle my emotions. They become a person's primary coping mechanism in a way. So the brain obviously has that reward center that's stimulated. As these scary emotions that start coming up, I can push them down and numb them with the eating disorder. When I don't use the eating disorder, they refer to it as using, just like they would in an addiction. Are you using behaviors? For me, the behavior is restriction. When they say, are you using, that means, are you restricting? Yes, that stimulates the reward center of my brain, just like neutral or pleasant activities should, but in an addiction, chemicals and drugs and alcohol, food for some people, eating disorder behaviors for some people. So that's stimulated, and this dependency and addiction cycle continues on. I become more reliant on that reward stimulation, and this is how I get it. I feel better when I do this thing, because that's easier than actually feeling things. And for somebody who's not really felt a lot her whole life, that's kind of a scary thing to do. So it takes a lot of effort to break that cycle. Co-occurring disorders often happen with eating disorders. It could be drug and alcohol addiction, OCD, depression, anxiety. For me, the biggest problem for me is OCD with my eating disorder, and usually in anorexia, almost everyone that I've ever met with anorexia also has OCD tendencies as well. For me, I have the typical anorexic OCD, and then when my weight gets very low, I sort of go into full-blown classic OCD as well around food. So just to describe that a little bit, usually anorexic individuals have the OCD portion of where they're number crunching in their head all the time. There's not a minute where there's not a little person up there calculating numbers, whether that's calories or what am I going to eat now so that I can eat later, and how does this fit into there, and I can't eat this now because I have to eat this later, and crunching numbers all the time. Obsessive about their weight going up and down, measuring food, counting food, knowing the calorie count in every food, checking, rechecking, counting, rechecking, measuring, remeasuring, forming rituals around eating time, eating in a certain way, in a certain place, alone, with certain utensils, in a certain order. There's just a lot of that around anorexia. For me, all of that occurs, then also, like I said, when I get into a very low weight range, I get into more classic OCD stuff where the eating disorder voice gets very loud. So when I, for example, am going to fix something to eat, and I think, okay, I'm going to fix this, I'm going to sit down, the anxiety piles on, piles on, piles on, and almost every day, I don't think it's going to happen, but it's probably 3 or 4 hours it takes me to actually sit down. After it's prepared, 3 to 4 hours go by of me doing compulsive behaviors before I'm calm enough to actually sit down and eat the food. And what goes on in my head at that point is it only occurs, the OCD doesn't do this at other times of the day, only when I'm going to eat. So usually it ends up with me on the floor in a ball crying, like, please stop, I just want my mind to turn off. Like, that's all I want is for my mind to turn off for 2 seconds so I can sit down and just eat this meal without the constant stuff in my head. But an example of what my eating disorder voice or OCD will tell me, and as I said, this is sort of embarrassing. I mean, it's a lot of stuff that logically I know has nothing to do with food, or, because this isn't even checking food stuff. This is like compulsive behaviors like checking door locks and washing hands and things like that, like your classic OCD stuff. So my eating disorder will say, okay, Beth, you can stop, but you're going to pay for it. You're not going to be able to enjoy your food if you're worried about door locks. And if you're not enjoying the food, what's the point of putting that horrible stuff into your body? Food is sinful pleasure, and its only purpose is gluttonous enjoyment. So go ahead, don't follow my rules. I'm not going to let you forget this. You're going to be plagued with guilt and shame after mindlessly eating. Or worse, it may even turn into a downward spiral, and you'll end up eating more than you should because your mind isn't focused. It's thinking about the damn door lock, so you lose your concentration and eat more than you should. Then what will happen? You're going to pay for it on the scale. You're going to gain weight. And if you would just go check that door one more time, you don't have to deal with this. Just go check it one more time. You'll be fine. You'll be fine. Then you can sit down. You can enjoy your food. And you won't have to worry about it. You'll make sure you're eating the right amount. You'll keep your weight in check. Or better yet, you might even lose some weight. Bonus. And then you won't have to worry about the negative consequences. So, see, I'm just trying to save you from unnecessary pain. This is the stuff that goes through my head during this whole time. I will sit there, tried every trick in the book. Lately, I've been, sometimes I call somebody, sometimes I text one of my friends. Can you just tell me that this is stupid? Like, stop doing this. Like, I've washed my hands 500 times. It has nothing to do with gaining weight. I know this. I'm not delusional. I know it is not connected, but that anxiety and that, it's hard to talk about because I get so mad at it, and I get so mad at myself. I've tried the other route where therapists are like, be kind with yourself, be nice with yourself about it. Like, and then I say, okay, but it's okay that no, it's not okay. Like, it's not okay that I've checked the door lock 700 times. That's not going to make me gain weight. Hello, it's not connected. So anyway, that is that piece of it. Some myths about eating disorders, which I think a lot of people have heard. Myth, eating disorders are a lifestyle choice. Someone can choose to have or not have an eating disorder. Absolutely false. It was not a choice. I didn't wake up one day at college and say, I think I'm going to be anorexic. Yep, that sounds like a good idea. I think I'm going to do that. Never happened. Didn't even admit to it for a long time. And I can't just turn it off. It's beyond that. It's not a choice. I would not honestly wish this on my worst enemy. It's living in a prison of your own making that I can't get out of. And when you're battling against yourself, it feels even harder. Like, I'm fighting against me. I built this prison that I live in, and I'm the only one who can get myself out of it, but I need help, and I haven't really found the help that I guess I need to be able to do that. So it's frustrating. And I'm not shirking responsibility. I'm not saying that I can't, I do take responsibility for it, and I know it has to be me that makes the change. I want that for myself. It's not that I don't want to eat. It's not that I hate that. I hate going to parties and social events and friends' houses and my nieces and nephews' birthday parties, and they've never seen me eat, my nieces and nephews. I've got a ton. They don't question it, but just Annabeth doesn't eat. Like, how nice would it be to go and have a piece of birthday cake with them? I want to be able to do those things. I don't take pride in going and sitting there and saying, I'm not going to have it. I want to fully participate in events in life. That's part of life, and I want to be able to do that. But in my mind, it's not an option. Like, in my mind, it's so ingrained. My voice says you're not allowed. It's not you're choosing not to, you're not allowed. And the little kid inside of me even throws temper tantrums sometimes. That's not fair. Like, why is she allowed to eat a piece of pizza and I'm not? Like, I want that. It looks so good. I want that so bad. I mean, it'll even drive me to tears. Why am I not allowed to eat and everyone else is? It's not fair. It's not, why am I not allowed? Again, that's the eating disorder voice. I need to separate myself out from that. I am allowed. I know that logically. But that voice, that programming, and they say it's programming, neural network programming. The good news is that that can be reprogrammed through a lot of hard work, but forming those new pathways is constant repetition of a better behavior every time. And when you're not in a treatment center, it's hard to have the strength to do that on your own all the time. So in my mind, it's not I'm choosing not to, or look at me, I have such willpower, I'm not going to eat. It's I would kill to be able to do that with you, and I can't, and I don't know why, and I don't understand it. The other myth is that people with anorexia don't like food, and their limited caloric intake consists only of incredibly healthy foods. I think I've made that pretty clear. It's not that I don't like food. We're actually anorexics mostly, every person with anorexia that I've met loves food, and actually they're pretty obsessed with it, and that's partially due to the starvation. Everyone knows when you deprive yourself of something, you start wanting that thing more and more and more and more. So you're in this starvation mode. Your body's constantly thinking about food 24/7, but that feels like a shameful, deep, dark secret. I don't want anyone to know how much I think about food. It's on my mind all the time. Like at the very beginning, I remember going to the library and just poring over cookbooks and cooking for people and being around people when they eat it and making food for people and flipping to commercials that had pictures of food because I just wanted, it's the next best thing. If I can't eat it, I at least want to see it. Like it satisfied something in me. But that was another secret because it's shameful and embarrassing. So I'm anorexic. I'm not supposed to like food. I'm supposed to, and it's safer. If people think that I don't, then they won't even push it on me. They just won't think I don't like it. I'm very comfortable in saying that that's not true anymore. There was a study down in the 1940s that can't be replicated because of ethical issues, but you may have heard of the Minnesota starvation study where they purposely starved very healthy men, reduced their caloric intake, starved them for 6 months, and watched how perfectly healthy men all of a sudden were completely obsessed with food. Everything, eating was the high point of their day. People think that that is the worst part of my day. It is the part that an anorexic person looks for. This is the little bit that I will allow myself, and it becomes everything. Like, my body finally gets food at this time. It's also the most dreaded part of the day because it's the most anxiety-provoking. So you're in this battle of, I've been looking forward to this for 24 hours. I finally get to taste something, and oh my gosh, I have all this anxiety about it. But they watched this happen to very healthy men who did form really weird rituals around food. They started eating in a certain way, had to do certain things, had to eat in a certain way. Again, they can't replicate the study, but it's very interesting. If you ever want to Google the Minnesota starvation study, it's a very interesting read. Obviously I've set myself up for this cycle of my body is starving, so it automatically starts obsessing about food, which then scares me to death because the eating disorder voice is telling me not that I'm an anorexic, that I'm a food addict, which means I need his rules to stay on track more than ever because you're addicted to food. Look at you, Beth. You're thinking about food all the time. You are addicted. You are going to go out of control. You need me to help keep you in check. You need me. Again, I logically know that when I'm not malnourished, when I get nourished in treatment and whatever, that part, I don't obsess nearly as much. And you'd think that would be a motivator. For some reason it doesn't work that way for me. You'd think it would be, if I want this to go away so bad and I know it goes away when I'm healthier, logically, that's a motivator to get healthier. But it never plays out that way in my life, and I'm not sure exactly why. Another myth, you can tell if someone has an eating disorder simply by looking at them. And I think this has a lot to do with, in the media and in TV and movies, they always portray the eating disordered individual as a severely emaciated person. Eating disorders don't discriminate size, weight, race, any of that. I've been in treatment with overweight people, with underweight people, with doctors, not doctors that are treating me, that are patients. A dietitian once was in treatment with me. A surgeon was once in treatment. It's not a lack of knowledge. It's not, we don't know what's happening. It doesn't discriminate. You can't tell if a person has an eating disorder just by looking at them. And the eating disorder voice uses this for manipulation too. It loves to use that angle of, you don't look sick, you're not sick. And that, I think it makes it harder for people sometimes with like bulimia. Usually bulimics aren't underweight, or binge eating disorders who are overweight. They can look at somebody who is in a severe anorexic state and their eating disorder voice, that person needs help, they're sick, you're not. Stop feeling sorry for yourself. And one thing that's consistent through everyone I've ever met with an eating disorder, no matter what weight they're at all, one thing is the same. Your eating disorder voice, you are never sick enough. You are never sick enough to need treatment. Somebody is always worse. My eating disorder voice, a lot of times, you're feeling sorry for yourself. You're looking for attention. You're trying to make a bigger deal out of this than it is. You're fine. You're absolutely fine. It downplays it so much. So people who aren't underweight anorexics have an even harder time dealing with that because a lot of times they're met with resistance. Even doctors will say, you're fine. You're fine. Don't worry about it. But they know I'm not, because the problem is up here. It's in your mind. It's not in your body. It's in your mind. Like I said, even at the times where I was more functional for those 5 years, the eating disorder voice was still there. It was still going. I wasn't better. Another myth is that eating disorders are primarily about food and weight, and recovery is achieved once a person is weight restored and meeting appropriate caloric needs. If that were the case, I would be better. There have been plenty of times that I've gone into treatment gain the weight, come back, and because we didn't address the underlying issues, it resurfaced. And in treatment, usually the behaviors are focused on. You have a limited amount of time, it's the behaviors that are focused on. And people think that once you get back to your normal weight or once you're nourished, you'll be okay again. It doesn't work that way. The eating disorder behaviors are symptoms. They're not the problem, they're symptoms. Food and weight and what we do with food and weight are symptoms of a much deeper thing that's going on in our minds. And actually, unlike other things, things actually get a lot harder once weight restoration takes place, physically, mentally, emotionally. Not only are we not using this behavior that has stifled our emotions, so we have all this stuff coming up that we don't know what to do with, that feels big and huge. So all of this emotional stuff is coming up. We're feeling guilty about eating, so it's this mental game. And physically we're not feeling well. Our bodies are not used to food. It's not used to nourishment. Our bodies are going crazy. That's one reason that there's something called refeeding syndrome. Refeeding has to be done, and I kind of hate that word, but it needs to be done very slowly and very carefully, because you can't just, back at the beginning, my doctor was like, you go out, you get 3 Big Macs and some large chocolate shakes, you'll be good to go. He obviously didn't know what he was talking about. So it needs to be done really carefully and under supervision, because people have even died from refeeding syndrome, because your body goes into shock of getting the nutrients again, so it has to be done really carefully. And this can take years, and those effects can last for years and years afterwards. So it's really frustrating, and I'm sure my friends have felt frustrated. I know my family has, when you're in treatment or you're doing a little bit better, and they think, because the logical brain would think, you're nourished now, don't you feel better? No, I feel worse. Everything feels horrible. Everything. My body feels horrible, my mind feels horrible, I feel horrible. And the thing that will make it go away is right there. I know what will make that go away, right there, just like a drug or just like alcohol. I just need to start restricting again, then I'll feel better, because I can't deal with all this stuff that's happening. And everyone thinks I'm feeling better and I don't, so I'm disappointing them and I'm frustrated with myself. And it snowballs into, I need the quick fix. I just need to make it go away. So for me, where am I? Okay. The myth, eating disorders are about vanity and wanting to be thin. I don't have body dysmorphic disorder. A lot of people with anorexia do, which means it's kind of that textbook thing of, or at least when I was in school, it was like a one-pager in your health book that this is anorexia, and it had like a picture of a really skinny girl looking in the mirror and sees like a ginormous or overweight person. It's not how it is. I don't look in the mirror and see a ginormous person. I look in the mirror and I see reality. I don't think I look good. I know I don't see myself delusionally. I see myself for what I am, which is probably why I try to hide myself a lot. So it's not an attempt to be thin and beautiful at all. There's that reward center that's stimulated as I lose weight, even though my logical brain knows I look worse, I feel worse, but this reward center is stimulated and that feels good. So it's really kind of a messed up thing. But it does have a biological base, and rather than an attempt to be thin and beautiful, for me it's been kind of an attempt to disappear entirely. The smaller I can make myself, the less needy I am, like physically making myself smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until I disappear. Like I said, I've always felt like I was kind of too much for people, so it's not a quest for the perfect body, and I don't, and a lot of other people don't look in the mirror, and it's not a skinny girl who doesn't like to eat and thinks she's fat. I don't think I'm fat. I'm very well aware of my situation. The last myth is men don't get eating disorders. They absolutely do. 1 out of every 10 people with an eating disorder is a male. I've been in treatment with a lot of males, every age from 18 to 65. Last spring when I was in a center in Colorado, there was a 65-year-old man there, and my heart just went out to him because, first of all, the older generation has less knowledge, I think, about eating disorders than the younger generation sometimes, depending on who you're around and what field you're in. But here's this 65-year-old man with anorexia. His family didn't understand that at all. His peers didn't understand that at all. I loved him to death. Like, I get emotional when I think of him, and I wish he could have stayed there forever, because at least he was with people that got him. He had no support in the outside world for a 65-year-old guy with anorexia, that would be a really difficult thing. So it's just, I think it's really hard for males to deal with that. And there's been two schools of thought on recovery from eating disorders. One is being in recovery your whole life, and one is believing in full recovery. I would like to believe in full recovery. I don't have any personal data on that yet, but I would like to believe in that. In recovery is the theory that you're always going to have to work on this. It's kind of what I was doing for those 5 years. Managing your symptoms, the eating disorder voice is still there. It may get quieter, but it's still there all the time. You're always going to have to stay on guard. You're going to have to stay on top of it, or it's going to flash back into a full-blown eating disorder again. The other school of thought that's becoming more popular now is full recovery. The complete absence of behaviors, the complete absence of the eating disorder voice. Seems like a miracle to me. I don't know if it's real. I don't know anyone specifically, and that's been a problem too. I know people who say that they have achieved full recovery, but they're mostly public speakers and authors that I don't know personally. I have no reason to doubt their stories, but if I don't know anybody personally. And I know a lot of people that have eating disorders, and it's really frustrating. All these Facebook friends from treatment people that I've met, who it really becomes a way of life. They're in and out of treatment centers their entire life, and they are referred to as treatment hoppers. They just go from center to center their entire lives. I've seen some younger girls who get treatment right away or who have only struggled for a couple of years, but I would say for the long-term chronic anorexic adult individual who has struggled more than 3 or 4 years, I've not seen or known anyone to achieve full recovery. Maybe I'll be the first someday, but I haven't seen that happen. So it's frustrating to see people relapse over and over and over and over again, and it's really easy to give up trying when you just see people falling back into it. It's really rare when you're in treatment to meet a first-timer. Usually people in treatment have been to lots of centers, come from another center, oh, where have you been, where have I been, blah, blah, blah. And it becomes this weird like eating disorder culture, like this world of eating disorder people. Have you been here? I was there. Oh, this place is amazing. I was there 8 times. It's like, so amazing. Why were you there 8 times? Like, I don't get it. Like, what was so amazing about it? It clearly didn't really help. So, I don't know. That is also an issue. Until last summer, Ohio didn't have any residential or inpatient centers at all. So you had to go out of state, which was a problem. I mean, then you have flight fare. Then you have leaving families, leaving jobs. People who have children needed to make arrangements for their kids to get help. Last summer, Cleveland opened up the first residential treatment center called the Emily Program. It was started in Minnesota. They started one in Cleveland. So Cleveland now, Ohio does have one residential treatment center in Cleveland that people can go for. Insurance is a huge, huge problem. Insurance very, very rarely covers the higher levels of care at all. And when they do, they kind of call the shots on treatment. So your treatment isn't up to your treatment team, it's up to insurance. And when I first started going to treatment centers when I was in my 20s, it wasn't handled that way. I was guaranteed a 60-day stay. I went there, they got what they could from insurance, and then as the years went on, all these treatment centers started popping up all over the country. It became a business of their own. Insurances got involved. The place that I was at that handled it that way is no longer in existence because they couldn't compete with the insurance industry, and they were losing money because they weren't getting paid by the insurance, and yet they were guaranteeing people a 60-day stay. But there was comfort in that, and there was stability in that, and there was safety in that. Going to a treatment center now, every insurance is different, but they usually require updates from your team every 2 to 3 days. So every 2 to 3 days, you didn't know if you were going to be sent home. Insurance cut you, I'm sorry, you have to leave. So it's really hard to make yourself that vulnerable and let go and have all this stuff come up when you don't know if you're going to be there to complete the process. You don't know if in 2 days you're going to be on a plane going back home because you don't qualify anymore. Your team thinks you need to be there for 6 months, and insurance says, no, I think you're okay now, you're good to go. I've seen people leave their families, leave their little children, fly across the country, and 5 days later are told they have to go home because they're cut. And there's no like pre-thing that you can do where they guarantee you a specific amount of time. So it's this, and I've been caught in this cycle a lot. I get in treatment and I'm scared to death to surrender or submit fully to a program, again, not knowing if I'm going to be able to see it to the end, because I might have to leave, and then what am I going to do? You've just brought out all this stuff in me, and then I'm going to be alone. So that makes it really, really hard for people. The DSM, the latest version of the DSM-5 did make changes trying to help, and that was a big effort of NEDA, the National Eating Disorders Association, and some attorneys in California that changed the criteria in hopes that insurance companies couldn't use that to cut people so quickly. So they took away the thing that said you have to be 85% or less of your body weight. They address that now by just saying that there needs to be a restriction of energy intake leading to a significantly low body weight, hoping that insurance companies wouldn't cut you the second you got to 85%, because really the healing hasn't even started. You're putting the cream on the rash, you're healing. You know, often I describe it like that. Like, you clear the rash, you clear the symptoms, you're eating better, you're not using the behavior, but if you don't clear the infection, that rash is going to come back. So clearing the symptom, band-aiding the thing doesn't work. Eating food doesn't fix the problem. It heals the symptoms, and then you can start working on the real problem. So if you don't get to that point, and insurance companies kind of just look at the physical stuff. Your blood work's fine. Again, that's kind of a negative of my blood work and EKG always coming back fine. Well, that's all fine. We don't care that you're X number of pounds, but you know, everything's fine, you're fine, we're gonna help you. So that's a huge issue. But there have been, and there's efforts, you know, to change that criteria. We'll see what happens. And the biggest barrier is that it's, the current treatment is largely ineffective for especially the adult chronic population. Again, because it is focused on behaviors, and I don't know what the answer is. I don't think anybody does. That's why there is so much research and stuff that's going into this right now. It doesn't work because you're in a very artificial setting. It's a very controlled environment. And in a way, there's safety and security in that, but then you try and transplant you from, for me in Colorado, I'm doing this thing where all my decisions are made for me. Everything is decided. I have no choice. I'm doing all of these things in this artificial setting. And then I go back to my life in Columbus, Ohio, where I go to work and I just have a completely different life, and it doesn't seem to carry over. So like I said, I don't know very many people, except for the people that have just struggled for a short time or a couple of years, that have been able to maintain recovery. So it needs to stop being such a behavioral approach. Again, I don't know what the answer is. I don't know what the answer is. If I did, I'd be doing it and I'd be better. But you can't address just the symptoms without addressing the underlying issue. When I was in one of my treatment centers, they asked me to do a talk for parents that had come in, parents and spouses. There was always a family component, whether that be your spouse or whatever, for like a week while you're in treatment. And if your family has the money, they fly out and you go through this session. But for me, communication is the key thing here. People would say, what can I say to somebody? I always feel like I'm saying the wrong thing. You will always say the wrong thing. Like, you're always going to say the wrong thing, because the eating disorder voice is never going to like what you say. You can be so well-intentioned. You look great. You look so much better. Eating disorder voice, you look fat. You've gained weight. They notice you've gained weight. You look gross. You're ugly. It will distort anything you say. Anything. So you can't. You're not going to say anything right. So my biggest advice was ask. That's been the most helpful for me. When ask your wife, what would be helpful for you right now? When I say, Liz or Kelsey, tell me that this is normal. Like, okay, if this is normal, then I'm eating this right now. This isn't too much, right? Like, I need to tell them what I need to hear. If they were to just say, that's fine, Beth, you're eating fine, I'd be like, oh my gosh, lay off me, stay away from me. But if I am telling you what I need and then getting that feels a little bit better for me. And it makes it easier on them. They don't have to play the guessing game of what can I say right now or what should I say. Topics to always avoid with somebody who struggles with an eating disorder: any topics around diet and weight loss, numbers, calories, weight. It's funny to me, not funny, actually annoying, but if people think it's okay to ask a really thin person, you're so skinny, how much do you weigh? Would you ask an extremely overweight person that? No, absolutely not. You don't ask, like, that is so offensive to me. I don't know. But, so any comment regarding physical appearance or what a person is eating or not eating, eating disorder is going to screw with that. So I would just avoid that at all times, even when well-intentioned, even when you have the most well-meaning thing to say. It's better to keep the focus on feelings rather than the behaviors. That acknowledges to the person that it's more than your food and your weight. It's how are you feeling today? Like, what's going on in your life? Talk about the real stuff, not just the symptomatic stuff. And unconditional love, support, compassion. And so that is my story in a nutshell. And I'm open to questions if anybody has any questions.